All right, hi. This is Vicki Kirsch, commonly known as Miss Vicki at Star Garden Parenting. And this is Thoughts from Today on Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. And today I am talking about cooking, obviously. That's the name of the talk. But I will be talking about basic principles that I use or follow, and some of the practices that I do, and my spiritual practice that I use in cooking. And this was inspired by Karen, who's in the class, who asked me last week, can you give us the recipes? And I had to say to her, well, no, I don't use recipes. And occasionally I'll use recipes for inspiration just to give me a little idea, but I'm really incapable of following a recipe is what it boils down to. And so these are some of the principles that I follow. Now, one of the very first things that I do is I think the principle of eating to live, not living to eat is important, and that cooking for health is one of my main principles. And I've been studying health and nutrition since my early 20s. I had a basically decent American diet, but filled with basically a lot of sugar and white food. And then I met this woman, older to me at the time, who called herself Mother Earth. And she told me, don't eat white food, meaning don't eat white flour and don't eat sugar. And other than that, just eat whole food. So that's one of the basic principles that I follow. I also follow the principle of using 99.9% organic or biodynamic, and just the best quality. And we grow as much of the food as we can, which many of you can't do, but you have farmers markets, and at least here in Colorado, we have quite a good choice of organic biodynamic food. And above and beyond that, another principle that I just follow naturally because I'm a gardener is eating seasonally. Now, on next Tuesday, I'll be doing my parent night called Nutrition, Health, and Illness, and I'll go into more information on why to eat seasonally. But when you grow a garden, you basically eat seasonally because the food is just pouring in. We have so much food right now. And and a good thing to know is that when you cook, you do it with a lot of love in your heart, and you visualize the people that you're cooking for. And, I never did cook a meal for one person or the other. I just visualized the whole group, my family. Now for Star Garden, it's the whole group, the children at all, although I cook for adults and the children get served basically fruits and seeds or nuts. But almost all the time they want to eat the adult food. And part of that reason is that they like the group activity. It's like breaking bread together. It's a very holy experience. We go through this whole thing, the puppet show, and then we do our blessing, which is a long, extended, beautiful blessing. And then the children get served their food and the parents. So as I was saying to Angelina earlier, the children really love ritual. They love scripted ritual. It's very comforting to them that they come and they know what to expect. Some children, when I change from sunflower seeds to, pumpkin seeds, they're like upset because the script changes a little bit. So anyway, that's a really good thing to know that children like that. And so I never did for my own children cook one dish for this and one dish for the other. I always was sure to include something that I knew they would eat. And just like that. But for now, when I cook for Star Garden, I'm envisioning the whole group. And I'm looking in my pantry, which is stocked with food, and I start to envision what kind of combinations I can put together. So one of the really good things to remember is that the more color you have in your food, the healthier it is. The purple colors are more magnesium, the oranges are more vitamin A's, and so on and so forth. So as much color as you can get into the dish is a really good thing to do for nutrition, which is the main reason I cook. It should taste good, obviously, but I'm trying to build good health mainly. So, and then back to that thing that the woman Mother Earth told me about, no whites and no sugars, no white flour. Those foods are anti-nutrient. They basically rob your body of minerals and vitamins to digest them. And often they don't digest and they interfere with your digestion. So it's good to avoid that as much as you can. And my way of avoiding it is to not buy it, not have it in the home. If I go out and eat that somewhere, fine, or to a potluck or whatever. But in my own home, I don't. And I don't buy the foods that I don't want to eat because I really have no self-control. But I do if I don't buy it. It really works that way for me. So anyway, when I'm trying to decide what to cook, I use my intuition. And in Waldorf education, there's this practice, and they really teach it without telling the children, starting in the elementary school and on through the middle school and up into the high school. It's called Goethean science. And it's basically using your senses to gain perceptions, and through those perceptions to have ideas, thoughts, inspirations, and imaginations that help you to do something. So when I start trying to think of, okay, so this week we had spaghetti squash with carrots and cabbage. Well, I had those foods, but I could imagine them together. I could imagine the taste together. And then I start to think along the lines of, is there some ethnicity that I want to come into this food? Like, I'm very big on northern New Mexico cooking, which is a lot of green chilies. And so often I will go that direction. But you can go to the Indian way with the curries and so on, and the Thai way and all, the Asian and so on. But kind of leaning towards, well, what ethnicity am I'm heading towards with this? And yeah. And then another really strong practice I've had, there's a wonderful book, and I couldn't see it on my shelf today, so I'm going to have to look for it, but it's a wonderful book about herbs and nutrition. And especially the way things are today, we all need digestive boosters, and that's what all the herbs and the spices are. They boost your digestion. For instance, turmeric, ginger, black pepper, even salt. Salt is hydrochloric acid, or that's what forms hydrochloric acid in your stomach so that you can digest. The cinnamon is excellent for your digestion. And then the other herbs like rosemary, marjoram, thyme, all of those help to boost your digestion. As I said today, rosemary is very warming to your system, and you start to need more warmth. Most of us do need more warmth. Most of us have weak digestions. Not everyone. There are people who have too strong of a digestion, for instance, but most of us need warming. And so I'm putting in flavors knowing that that's what helps us to digest the food that we're eating. And I think, most people don't know that. And then also you can use the fermented foods to put in, like, fermented soy sauces, for instance, which I don't use in this class because the fermented has gluten in it. So I use the gluten-free, but in my own home, I use the fermented soy sauce, which those of you who don't have that gluten issue should, because it's an opportunity to introduce digestive factors into you. So you can put yogurts in. I don't do all these in class because of the restrictions with dairy and so on, but I'm just telling you what you can do in your home. Yogurt, kefir, sour cream, sauerkraut, miso is a really excellent one. And those are the main ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But if you go to Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, she has recipes. She's the one who introduced fermentation to me. And in past times, people used to, in past times, people ate fermented food with every meal. And that's what the condiments were, the ketchups, the mustards, and mayonnaises and so on. They were fermented foods. So Sally has recipes for those in her book, and they're quite wonderful if you wanted to pursue that. So, you know, with all of this food, this is how I cooked for my children. I didn't cook particularly spicy. It didn't seem spicy to me, but it might seem to some people. Like I have a little boy every time who says, "This is really spicy." But you have to know I use cayenne sauce. And cayenne sauce has vinegar, and vinegar is very good for your digestion. And it has cayenne. And cayenne and all the peppers boost your digestive ability. So I'm always, you know, it's just my practice having studied it and added these principles into my cooking as I went along in life. So another really good principle I use is I actually don't do too many grains. I do quinoa, millet, and rice, and rotate them. Amaranth I would like to bring in a little more. And I toast them first, and the toasting breaks down the starches and it introduces a nice toasty taste. And the thing to know about quinoa is that it's not even a grain. It's related to beets, which is wonderful. And both millet and quinoa are not as acidic as the other grains. And so, you know, and I just use small portions of grain for the most part. Occasionally I'll do a grain dish with vegetables in it, but mostly I do vegetables with a few grains in it, or even salads with a little bit of grain and the rest, the vegetables. Because vegetables are all the antioxidants. They're the ones filled with the vitality and filled with life force and healing factors. And another principle that I really like to use is that even if I'm doing cooked food, like today, I put cucumbers in the spaghetti squash with all the vegetables in it. Had no grains, but I put the cucumbers in so that you have some live food, because the live food brings the enzymes, and enzymes help digestion as well. So you keep hearing me use the word digestion. So basically, you have to look after your digestion. And over time, I will talk more about that. The older you get, but really that's not true. You go down to a young child and an infant. You have to introduce food carefully to children, most of them. Sometimes there's a child that, you know, it isn't true about, but for most children, when they're nursing, the sign that they're ready for food is that their teeth come in. And the teeth coming in is showing you that their body is introducing the digestive factors to eat food. Now, there's all kinds of theories about that. Mine is really good food, for one. I mean, good by quality, like biodynamic, organic, and then simplicity. But you introduce food one at a time and then watch and see what the effect is. And often you can tell by their reaction. Although some children just react to newness and don't want to have anything to do with newness, so there is that characterization that you have to try it 12 times before they'll ever have anything to do with it. But nonetheless, you introduce food carefully that way, and especially the food sensitivities, the allergic foods. You know, stay away for a good while. Don't introduce them when they're really young, and those are the citrus, the grains, the strawberries, eggs, dairy. Those you wait until they're, you know, a few months or around a year old, past a year old even, depending on how they've done when they were younger with what was being introduced to them. But as they come into an ability to sit at the table and eat, which I'm a firm believer in, children should sit and eat, and I introduced high chair when they could sit. And I would put them in the high chair when I was cooking, and I would let them help me cook. At a very young age, they could tear lettuce, they can use a butter knife to cut bananas or whatever, and they can eat what's there, or play with it, or, you know, explore it. And so they got used to being part of the mealtime routine, and they just adapted to sitting and being part of a meal. And then as they got a little older, say around 2 years old, then they started eating the foods that we were eating. And they were just introduced to food tastes all along, the herbs and the spicier food. And the thing about eating and eating for health, if you avoid the processed foods, which have so many food additives that it interferes with your ability to perceive, your body to perceive whether that food is good for you or not. MSG is terrible for your body. It gives your body all kinds of false messages. And basically you're trying to work with them when they're really young to have their body develop an intuition for what's good for them. So I did forget to mention that when they were younger, it's often good to have foods separated so that they can determine what's good for them and what's not, because different foods are good for different people at different times. And very commonly children will eat carrots, 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 and then one day they're like, oops, no more carrots. Well, their body's just telling you that they've had enough carrots. Could be seasonal, maybe nutritiously, they just don't need that. But anyway, these are practices that you can do with your young child. And then another principle that I use are the 5 tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. What umami means, I think it means meat, but it's more like meat taste. And for vegetarians, the meat taste is generally nutritional yeast. Although mushrooms are umami taste. There's other ones, but I can't remember what they are. But anyway, the other thing I did is I was studying nutrition and what would be good and what would be healthy. I studied Asian nutrition, whole foods, and I studied vegan principles and so on. I just studied all these different things, and it's very, very enlightening when you look at that. The Asian principle is that you should have all 5 tastes in a meal, and that the Americans, by eating mainly sweet, which is probably pretty true of most of us, you're only feeding your stomach, but the other 5 tastes feed other organs. The bitters feed your liver. In other words, they help your liver to function. So I try to do that, and when I'm starting to add the flavors, I wait till everything's cooked, and often I cook things sort of separately depending on what I'm cooking. So I'll cook the grain, if I'm going to have grain, a day before. I'll cook the squash the day before. Then I bring it all together and I start sauteing this, and I didn't want to saute the cabbage with everything because it was purple and it would turn everything purple, so I sauteing separately and that sort of thing. But then as I put everything together and I start adding food tastes or food qualities, I try to balance those flavors together. And I also use the principle of yin and yang. And does this taste a little too yang? Do I need a little more yin? And when I need more yin, then I'll put vinegar or lemon. Lemon's a really great flavor to put in, and also a digestive booster. And try to bring things to a balanced state that way. And the way I've learned to do that, because I'm cooking large amounts when I'm cooking for Star Garden. And so I think, well, I want this in there, but I'm not sure it'll be good. So I'll take a little portion, I'll put some of that in there and stir it a little bit and taste it and go, that's good, but it needs a little more of this, or it needs a little more of that. And I just keep adding till I get a flavor that feels balanced and nourishing. So, yeah, there's that. And then, yeah. So those are the main principles that I use, and can't think of any off the top of my head, but studying nutrition is really important. As I said in class today, it's important for your children, because your children behave based on how they feel in their body, how constitutionally how their body is. And this time of year, when you go into seasonal changes, you're looking at your whole digestive system shifting. And often you're looking at a cleansing time. The liver needs help. And you're looking, so when that starts to happen, then absorption doesn't take place very easily. So you start to get nutritionally deprived. And as I said today, for children, often whininess or crabbiness can be a liver, iron deficiency or a calcium magnesium deficiency. Those are two common deficiencies, and that there are certain ways which over time I can show you and teach you what to look for, that you can sort of determine what it might be. And yeah, you know, when you're feeding your children, you have to observe them a lot and, you know, really work with them. I don't mean working with them, but work with the whole principle of observation and smelling them and looking at them and listening to them and really trying to gain an understanding of what it is they need to help them in terms of food. Because, well, especially in our time, it's very challenging because the foods are not as nutritionally rich as they used to be. The minerals and the vitamins are poor because the soils are poor. If you want a healthy garden, if you want a healthy person, you have to have healthy soils. And the mainstream food has no consideration of that at all. And they've watched, as they tested food, they've watched the food value go down. And they'll tell you that it's questionable that organic food is more nutritious, but that is not true. There's plenty of tests that show it is, and there's other tests, not just in terms of minerals and vitamins, but the vitality of the food. And for those of you who live in Boulder or Longmont, you can go to the farmer's market and go to the food stand for Aspen Moon Biodynamic Food. And you can tell by looking that the food has more vitality. You can tell by taking it home and using it. It lasts longer, it stays fresher, you taste it, the taste is better, so on and so forth. So we have to watch our health now more, not only because the food is deficient, but also because we're exposed to so many toxins that are damaging to our organs and that we have to contend with on an ongoing basis. So yeah, so food today is not as much nutritional value and not as much vitality. And so that's just a basic fact. So I don't like taking supplements, but I really have to, even though I eat really well sometimes. A lot of times I just go without eating and I need my supplements. So yeah, but you also can use herbs for nutrition. All the teas, if you look and study herbology, and I can tell you the ones that I've used for my children and for myself. And then there's tinctures, and I introduced my children to tinctures very young. I introduced them to liver tincture. They would take tinctures straight because I introduced it when they were young. And so there are other ways to bring about nutrition. Today we spoke about homeopathy and cell salts, which helps your body to absorb nutrition. So there's a lot of things we can do, and over time I hope I can be able to speak to you about more of it. So let me see. Yeah, so that's the basic thing that I do, and unless I see a question, I am going to close up here. I think that was a pretty decent introduction. Yes, I see one of my listeners saying that they did drink tinctures. That's true, and still do. And tinctures are amazing because they're basically concentrates of herbs, so that they take all the nutritional value and just compress it. Very good, especially for the liver. Yes. All right. Any other questions out there? Oh, how do I deal with picky eaters? Well, I never really had a picky eater, so I can't say specifically. But I think picky eaters become picky when they are exposed to foods that confuse your body in terms of nutritional value and in terms of the intuitive factor, and what I said before of the processed foods mess with you like you cannot believe. When you read the ingredients list, which for a good long time, you all should be reading all the ingredients list. And a really good thing to know about shopping if you're going at a regular grocery store, and you've probably heard this, shop the edges. What does the edges mean? It means where all the refrigerated food, it's where all the fruits and vegetables are, where the cheeses and the fresh meat and the dairy and the eggs, that's where it is. And avoid the middle of the store mostly. So what that means is that most of the packaged food has something in it that is not healthy for you. Not all, but many and most. And yesterday I had to drive to the airport to pick my son up, and I told him I was waiting at the cell phone area, so I just went in to find something to drink. I was in shock at what is on those shelves. It's all bright colors, which is your first clue. You know, like really artificial colors, like fluorescent blues and greens and pinks. That's your first clue that it's toxic. And what you have to know about food is now we have a food chemistry industry. It's been going on since, you know, probably starting in the 20s and 30s, but it really intensified in, say, the 60s. In the 50s, when I was growing up, it wasn't as much that way. Although in the 50s, the doctors said, don't nurse your children. You should be giving them a bottle for them to be healthy. I told people my first food was condensed pet milk, which is basically sugar milk mixed with water. Horrible. And that's what the doctors said to do, if you can imagine. So anyway, now though, there is a whole food industry, chemistry. And there's a woman in Boulder who wrote a book, and I don't remember what it is, but I read her whole thing, and she started looking into it because her child had so many food sensitivities and chronic illness. Chronic illness is like asthma, like cancer, like diabetes. That's just a beginning. Eczema, etc. Those are chronic illnesses that didn't exist as much when I was young. They just be coming forward more and more, and we'll talk about that more over time. It has more to do with than food. But anyway, this experience at this store last night just reminded me of, they now make chemicals to make you want to eat. They did that. That's how they got people addicted to tobacco. They put substances in it that make you get addicted. So the food is addictive. MSG is addictive. And MSG, they don't label food with MSG anymore because they know people know it's not good. It comes under different names. But the basic principle is when you're looking at the list of foods in your on the can or the label, if you don't know what it is, you shouldn't eat it. If you can't pronounce it, you definitely shouldn't eat it. You should recognize it. Beans, corn, you know, and if it has sugar way at the beginning, you shouldn't have it. Your body can't process it correctly. It helps create diabetes. So that's what I think really makes picky eaters. And yeah, it interferes with your body's intuition for what's really good for you. And that's partly why I have all the fruits and vegetables here at Star Garden, why I have the herb gardens. If kids can pick it, they'll eat it. Even if they sit at a table and say, I don't like plums, you go out into the plum orchard and they eat plums like they're going out of style. Really picky eaters, I started my herb garden for them because if they can pick a little herb and eat it, they love fennel, which is one of the best herbs for your digestion. And they just love fennel. And that has such a vivifying effect on their whole system and makes them want to eat other good foods. So that is hightailing. Yeah, and foods deprived of nutrients make you eat more than you need and more than you want. Obese people are actually starving. That's why they keep eating more, because they're not getting the nutrition that's satisfying, that's satiating. So they keep eating because their food has really no food value. So yeah, those are some principles to know. And we could go on, and I will cover more on my talk next Tuesday, which will be 7:30 to 8:30. Hopefully there's time for some questions. I really try to introduce a lot more thoroughly than these little talks where I'm just putting out things from the top of my head. How would you start to move of people from packaged convenience food. Oh, well, I probably would start with, if you're going to buy packaged food in the first place, buy the best quality packaged food you can. Organic, for one. And then I would learn how to make those dishes that you're buying from the package, like mac and cheese, for instance. You can make much more healthy mac and cheese. Now they have noodles that are almond flour, for instance, and cheese that's real rather than, that orange stuff on the commercial mac and cheese. So that would be a place that I would start. And I would always have the foods that you want your children to eat out on the counter. Have some fruits out there, have some vegetables out there, things that are appealing to them. Children like fruit and vegetables. Children actually need sugar. They need the fruits more than maybe we do. Yeah, and I would just stop using, it's been so long since I did any of that. I'm not a good advisor on it, but I would say just back off and learn how to cook, and learn to cook simply, and buy the best quality food you can. If you're buying meat, you get grass-fed meat. If you're buying eggs, get free-range eggs, free-range chicken, that sort of thing. That's a really important one. When we say packaged food, there's a huge difference in the quality of food that is around. And here in Boulder, we're so fortunate, you just can't imagine, that you can buy good quality food just about at every store, I've discovered now, like, the regular chain stores. So, and that's not true everywhere. And I'd say the thing to help your child, one of the best things you can do is to grow a little garden, even if it's a container garden. Because I'm not kidding you, if they can pick it, take them out to farms, take them to U-Pick farms. You find an apple tree and, ask people if you can pick. We have so many apples. As you know, we could pick all the apples here you want. So that's a couple of suggestions that I would have. And eliminate sugar. Sugar really interferes with so many bodily processes and make you eat in a very unhealthy way. And eat whole foods, just move away from the processed foods. Let me see. Yes. Yeah, so it looks like the questions are about coming to an end. Anything else out there? Hope this was helpful. Nutrition is a really important thing to me. In my 20s, I didn't feel that healthy. And so I just started studying it from the very beginning. And an important thing to know is that the young generation of children, say below 12 now, is called the RX generation, meaning they take more pharmaceuticals than any generation ever. They have more chronic illness than any generation ever. That does not reflect on our culture well at all. And it's actually very, very sad. Our children should be naturally healthy. They just should be. There is really no excuse for it, especially all the research that's out there. So it's my mission to help people with that, because it's not a good thing to go into life unhealthy. Health is what's going to get you everywhere. Money doesn't, and anything else. Health. So let me see. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, right. Some of our listeners are saying that even our chain stores are supporting local food. That's true. And organic. Although you have to be careful. The organic standard isn't necessarily what it says it is. And I will bring more in Star Garden about that, because it's a really lengthy conversation. And I actually have been an agricultural advocate. I come from an agricultural family. I have taken a deep interest in gardening and farming, and I've studied it intensively. And organic doesn't always mean what it says it is. And I think next week I'm going to introduce this document. There's a group that qualifies how really good the organic dairy is. And they're a certifying agency, and they go around and they observe. And they tell you which ones are good and which aren't. And the chain stores are not, they're following kind of semi-quasi-organic is what I would say. And so eating locally is really helpful, and knowing your farmer is really helpful if you can do that. Like I get goat milk from next door. I know this woman. Her goat milk is the best in the world. And you look at her goats and they're as healthy as anything. So that's another principle you can follow. And, you know, it's a really wonderful thing if your family has a relationship to a farmer, like Aspen Moon, biodynamic people. They are amazing. Their gardens are amazing. Their vegetables are amazing. Their family is amazing. When you know these farmers, what you know is that they grow their food with a lot of love. And that's how you want to cook your food, with a lot of love, because that's what goes through it more than anything. And that's really the principle of organics and growing food in a healthy way. It's that you love the earth, you love the elemental beings, you love the plants, you love the animals. And that's what goes through to you to eat. So that's just a really good principle to follow. Yeah, farm to table is very, very good. Yeah, the big corporations that have, you know, they're buying into organics because they can see it's popular, although not so long ago I read, I really think that the percentage of people that eat organic in the United States is definitely below 10%. Which is really sad. I'm sorry, that's sad. That's why our children are sick, because they're not eating well, amongst other things. There's other things that contribute to that. So anyway, yeah, all these principles are very, very good. Yes, support your local farmers. They need it. It's a hard industry, let me tell you. It's stacked against a farmer in a big way through the subsidies and the way that the subsidies operate. So if you can support a local farmer, that's the best thing in the world. And I've even thought about doing You Pick It out here, because you know how I have way too many plums, way too many grapes. Anyway, support your local farmer, and I think I should stop. Yeah. So this talk followed, really, we did go over simple principles that I follow, simple practices, and the spiritual practice, which really at the heart of it is the spiritual practice. From the start to the finish, from the farm to the table, it's the spiritual practice of love. That's what comes through the food. So I'm going to end this with a verse from dear Rudolf Steiner, who's a brilliant person, and he did a lecture series on agriculture. It's called the Agricultural Series. It's really beautiful, and I'll tell you the most touching thing of it all. He did it with all these farmers, and really with all of his followers, who are more like academicians. They were very brilliant people, chemists and mathematicians and so on. Really intellectual people were there too. So he spoke and he spoke, and at the end the farmers said, and by the way, the reason the farmers went to him, in their times when chemicals were introduced into farming, within a few years they saw the health of their animals go downhill very quickly. And that's why they went to Steiner. They said, why is this happening? Tell us. So he was giving them all the spiritual principles of spiritual chemistry, really. And at the end, they said to him, dear Steiner, Mr. Steiner, Dr. Steiner, that was wonderful, but we didn't understand a word of what you said. Could you really tell us what you meant? And he said, well, think of it this way. This is beautiful, really. And I love to think of this. He said that that your farm, you think of it as a piece of land with a fence around it, and that's your farm. But he said, think of it this way. That boundary of the fence line isn't just the land. It goes all the way out to the center of the universe. And so all the influences that pour down, the cosmic influences, are your farm. And it also goes all the way to the center of the earth, where at the center of the earth earth the cosmic Christ being resides and radiates love out. And that's your farm. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And also what he said was that we should try to practice biodynamic principles, which are very holistic, very close to permaculture, but with this other thing of using homeopathic principles around developing compost preparations and so on. But he said that we should have biodynamic farms here and there because they were islands of light. And that's really what I've tried to create at Star Garden, is an island of light. It's a sanctuary for people, for animals, for plants, and for elemental beings. And it's a place where love radiates, and love is catching. We all get it from all the plants here. Plants only radiate love. And so with that, I'm going to end with this verse from Steiner, which is just beautiful. Found it recently. May my soul bloom in love for all existence. That's Rudolf Steiner. At the end of all that complexity, may my soul bloom in love for all existence. Thank you and good night. And please tell your friends about that. I would love to be able to talk to parents who have specific questions about their children and parenting and be able to dialogue with you. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.